Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving into something huge, something that's often a massive hidden security challenge. We're talking about how to protect those core legacy applications that, actually run our businesses. These are the systems we count on day in and day out. But what if I told you they might just be your single biggest vulnerability?
So, let me just ask you this straight up. Think about your most critical applications. Are they also your biggest security blind spot? And it's a serious question, because honestly, for a lot of companies out there, the answer is a resounding yes.
All right, so let's really get into the weeds here. We're going to start with the systems that are the absolute heart of your business. The ones that are so critical, so baked in, that we kind of take them for granted and forget they even need to be protected.
I mean, think about it. We're talking about the real workhorses of your company. Your ERP platform that handles all the money, right? That custom CRM that's full of incredibly sensitive customer data. Your financial systems that process every single transaction. These things aren't just apps, no way. They are literally woven into the fabric of your daily operations. And this is the real kicker. The core of the problem is that these systems were built for a totally different world, an era where the thinking was, hey, if you're inside our network, you must be trustworthy. They operate on this principle of, implicit trust. And let's be real, in today's threat landscape, that's not just a bad assumption, it's a downright dangerous one.
So, the natural question is, how do we protect them, right? The go-to answer from most folks is vulnerability scanning. But what if that standard defense isn't just not enough? What if it's actually making things worse by giving you a totally false sense of security?
Here's a good way to think about it. A traditional vulnerability scan is like a security guard who just walks around a building and jiggles the doorknobs to make sure they're locked. Yeah, the doors are secure, great, but that guard has absolutely no clue what's going on inside the building. And that's the blind spot we're talking about. The real action, the hard-coded passwords, the logic flaws, the vulnerable code, it's all happening inside the app itself.
So the bottom line is, just relying on those old-school scans is really, really risky. You get a totally incomplete picture. You're always playing defense, always reacting. And get this, sometimes those aggressive scans can actually crash the fragile old systems you're trying to protect. And to top it all off, you end up with this giant, overwhelming list of flaws with zero context, so you have no idea what's actually important to fix first. It's a mess.
Okay, so if the old way is clearly broken, what do we do? Well, the solution starts with a pretty big shift in how we think about security. We have to flip the script and approach it from the inside out, and that all begins with adopting a zero-trust mindset. And zero trust, it's pretty much what it sounds like. The whole model runs on one simple but incredibly powerful idea. Never assume trust, always verify. What that means is every single user, every device, every application, it doesn't matter. It has to prove it's trustworthy every single time it tries to do anything. For these older legacy systems, this isn't just an update, it's a complete game changer.
So how do you actually do that? Well, this is how you put that mindset into action. You can do things like microsegmentation, which basically isolates your critical systems into their own little protected zones. You enforce super strict identity and access rules. Think multi-factor authentication everywhere. And you continuously monitor what the application is doing in real time. See? We're building security around and inside the app, not just sticking a fence around the property line.
All right, let's talk about the actual toolkit. How does this all come together into a practical strategy? A way to finally get eyes inside those application blind spots we've been talking about.
The key here is something called Application Security Testing, or AST for short. Now, this isn't just one tool, it's a whole family of them, and they are all designed for one purpose: to find vulnerabilities inside the application. We're talking deep in the code, in how it behaves when it's running, and in all those third-party bits and pieces it depends on. It is purpose-built to eliminate that blind spot.
A really solid AST strategy has like 3 main layers. Think of it as a defense-in-depth approach. First, you've got SAST. That's like analyzing the architectural blueprints of the application, the source code itself, before it's even running. Then you have DAST. This is where you test the live system, basically throwing simulated real-world attacks at it to see how it holds up. And finally, you have SCA, which inspects all the building blocks, all the open source libraries and components, to check for any known problems.
And this breakdown is just perfect for understanding how it all fits together. SAST is like your code-level detective, digging through the source code to find things like hard-coded passwords or SQL injection flaws. DAST, on the other hand, acts like a hired hacker, actively probing the running app for weaknesses like a broken authentication system. And SCA? That's your supply chain inspector, making sure all the third-party code you're using, code you didn't even write, is safe. When you put them all together, they see everything that old-school perimeter scan misses. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Hold on, if I run all these intense tests, isn't that going to crash my super fragile legacy system? And look, that is a totally valid concern. But the beauty of a modern AST approach is that it's designed specifically to not be disruptive. You can schedule tests for nights or weekends, you can use agentless methods that barely touch the system's performance, and this is the big one. You test it all in a safe, separate staging environment, not on the live production version.
So, what's the big payoff here? Why go through all this trouble? Well, let me tell you, this is about way more than just squashing a few bugs. This is about fundamentally protecting the absolute core of your business.
And this is exactly why it matters so much to the business. You're going to see a huge reduction in risk because you're fixing flaws before they can ever be used against you. It makes regulatory compliance, for things like PCI, HIPAA, all that fun stuff, so much easier to manage. Your systems become more stable because you're not constantly firefighting and doing emergency patching. And honestly, it's just cheaper. Finding and fixing an issue early in the game costs a tiny fraction of what it costs to clean up a massive data breach.
I really want this to sink in for a second. Application security testing. It's not a nice-to-have anymore. It's not optional. If your organization depends on legacy software to operate, and let's face it, whose doesn't, then this is an absolute, non-negotiable business imperative.
So, I'll leave you with this one final thought to chew on. Your business runs on legacy code. We know that. But is your security strategy actually built to protect it? Really protect it? From the inside out? It's time for all of us to look beyond the scan.